So the topic is a very simple one and a complex one at the same time. It's called God as Brand. So as soon as we decided on the topic, I sent a message to Santosh Desai of Future Brands. He's been a friend for a very long time. And I asked him, give me a simple one-line definition of brand, because it's a complex word. I have attended a lot of workshops to know that it can be defined in different ways. So I said, based on your experience, give me a simple one-line definition of brand. And this is what he said. He said, it is a pattern of expectations. That's the definition he gave, and I thought it was it's a pattern of expectations. Of course, then we went back and forth because I asked him, what about the pattern of fulfillment? Because you may not fulfill your expectations. And he says that creates another pattern of expectations, and that creates another pattern of expectation. So I will stick to that definition. Brand as a pattern of expectation. God is the space which I am far more familiar with. And it is a complex word because this is an English word. And in English, you have something called an uppercase and a lowercase. So God can be written with capitals, God can be written without capitals. They have two very different meanings. So when I write God as brand, who am I referring to? And it is the assumptions in our head. If this audience was European or American, the word would have a very different meaning. This is an Indian audience, and therefore the word has a very different meaning. It doesn't mean singular, because in India you have multiple gods. Shiva, Vishnu, Hanuman. It's not only masculine, it's also feminine. It's embedded in the idea. For me, Durga, Lakshmi, God. And so it is not singular, it is not masculine, and therefore the meaning starts to acquire, a very different meaning emerges. Then there are different words. Just the word God has different words. If today if I ask people, give me a word for God, translate it in English, he'll say Bhagwan. Then somebody will say Ishwar. He says, does Bhagwan and Ishwar mean the same thing? And they'll start thinking, because you will notice the word Bhagwan is used mostly for Vishnu, and Ishwar is used mostly, not always, for Shiva. So there is a particular pattern which builds up in the choice of words. Have these words been used always in India? No. If I read the Vedas, there is no word called Bhagwan. There is no word called Ishwar. So the words which emerge there are Purusha, Brahmana, which have completely different ideas embedded in the word. So this one word, God as brand, becomes complex in a context. So we have to contextualize ourselves in order to understand even a simple word called God. Who are you talking to? Who is your audience? To whom are you talking? And so I want to contextualize my conversation to an Indian audience. And imagine yourself trying to communicate an idea to an Indian audience 2000 years ago. This is the time space. This is the time space lock I want to put in to make sense of what I'm going to say. Because today, I thought I will talk about Shiva and Vishnu as brands. Familiar words, this is a common poster art, but there is no client which has asked for it. There is no, who did the planning for this? Who did the creative for this? Who did the media for this? How was this communicated, this idea? Because before 2000 years, these gods probably did not exist. This concept did not exist. We take it for granted that it has been there forever. They haven't. The Vedas don't mention Shiva and Vishnu. There are these words like Shiva and Vishnu, but they don't quite mean what we mean today. So somewhere 2000 years ago is a simple way of remembering. It may not be historically absolutely accurate, but it's a simple benchmark to remember, rough idea. That these ideas emerged 2000 years ago, and consistently the brand messaging is consistent for 2000 years. And it's happening involuntarily. It's not being done, as I said, by an agency. So when I speak of the Catholic Church, there is a church behind it. But not with these. There is no person who is responsible for the brand. There is no brand steward. There is no brand custodian. So how does this messaging, and what is the message? Is there a brand message, or is just randomly somebody decided one should look like this, one should look like that? Because the consistency in pattern which I would like to show you, you will see it in imagery, you will see it in stories, you will see it in ecosystem, you will see it in the animals associated with them, you will see it in the dance that they perform, and they are very different from each other. There are distinct brand identities being created because each one is creating a very different way of looking at them. Pattern of expectation for what? They're talking about life. They look similar to the untrained eye, and my purpose today in the next couple of minutes to show you how different they are and how consistent the patterns are. And how did it emerge is a huge mystery. We can imagine many things and speculate many things, but I really don't know how they emerged. So let me explain the context first. And one of the most significant events which happened in India was the rise of Buddhism. And it's not exactly the rise of Buddhism, technically it's the rise of what is called the Shramana culture. The Shramana culture, somewhere around the time when Alexander came to India, he saw that India was a very strange country. It was a country of hermits. Shramana means the hermit, the ascetic. And they continuously spoke of life as suffering, the world is a miserable place. All of them wanted to run away from the house, so they wanted to give up family life and go to the monastery, the vihara. So it was this hermit way, the hermit way. They want to let go, ye pura sansar. It's like those songs which say, Duniya mein aaye hain to jeena hi padega. This kind of tragic view of life, where life is miserable, life is horrible, life is painful, life is terrible, and the solace is go to the monastery. So this was the Shramana culture. So you had the Jainism, Buddhism, Ajivikas emerging at that time. And this whole idea of moving out of the household. So a simple example is Buddha's story. A married man with a child responsible for a kingdom walks away and becomes a monk. Does not come back to be a father, does not come back to be a son, does not come back to be a husband, does not come back to be a king. And this is happening around in every kingdom. It is also the time of Chandragupta Maurya, the India's first great empire. It's also the time of Ashoka. These are ambitious men who want to build empires. They have seen Alexander has conquered the great Persian Empire. Young boy with a small army. It's the equivalent of a Facebook and a Google at that time. Young men are watching this young boy with a small group of army destroys the great Persian Empire, comes all the way to India. हम भी ऐसे हो सकते हैं. Ashoka wants to create the great empire. Chandragupta wants to create. But what is happening around them? They're not finding soldiers because nobody wants to be a soldier. They are all going into Dhamma. They're all becoming monks. There is there's a social crisis going on. And therefore there's a demand for a new conversation, a new discourse. And the discourse is emerging. And we know this, that the new discourse emerged in India at this time. The old Vedic Hinduism transformed into Puranic Hinduism. This shift from Vedic texts, which were involved fire sacrifices and chanting, where there was no concept of a temple, there was no concept of a deity in a temple, changes, and suddenly India becomes the land of temples, in which you have these characters who are enshrined, and every character has a story, and a complex story. We don't realize Chandragupta Maurya probably didn't know Shiva and Vishnu. Probably. It's very speculative because there's no proof. Chandragupta Maurya himself becomes a Jain Muni. Ashoka becomes a Buddhist. These stories we have heard. Did they ever visit a temple of Shiva? Did they ever see iconography like this? Historians aren't sure because the temples emerged somewhere around 300, 400 AD. So what caused this dramatic shift in discourse? Because as we all know, stories, symbols and rituals are tools of communication. They communicate, and they communicate a specific idea. It does not appear in a vacuum. And this happened over centuries. It happened very gradually, very systematically. You see the rise of literature, you see the rise of these stories. So let us see what is the message being communicated. And to understand the message which is being communicated, look at this image very carefully. It's a composite image of Shiva and Vishnu. So it's not Ardhanarishwar, the half man, half woman form of God. This is two male deities, half of each other, combining. Look at the image very carefully. So what was the instruction given to people when they saw the image? They said, Darshan karo. What is Darshan karo? Look. Darshan in Sanskrit also means philosophy. So look at the image carefully. We may have seen it, but now pay attention to it. Dhyana do. On the left side is Shiva. And the image, if you look from, what do you see? Male image, yes, but that of a hermit. He's covered with ash. He's wearing animal skins. Around his neck, there are beads made of Rudraksh. Rudraksh is the seed of a plant. So you have a man, just visualize a male with, his hair is matted. He has got beads around his neck which is made of the seed of a plant. He's smeared with ash and he's wrapped in animal hide. He's holding a trident. And with him is a bull. Now think of a bull. It looks so domesticated over here, but bull is not a domestic animal. We live in cities, so we don't think like that. But a bull is a very violent and dangerous animal. You never keep it in the house and the compound. It is outside the village. It's kept away. If a bull comes, you stay away from it. Because it's extremely violent. If another bull, the two bulls meet, they will kill each other. They are very territorial animals. So here you see it in a very domestic, gentle, it almost looks, I have actually had people assuming this is a cow. And you see this form on one side. On the other side, so you look at this image, is it a hermit or a householder? You see, it's a hermit. ये भभूति लगा के बैराग है. On the other side, you have a man who is wearing gold. How do you make gold? You have to mine it, you have to smelt it, you have to design it. It's an ornament. To build that one crown, you will need a community of people involved in labor. It involves enterprise. It involves innovation. It involves taking resources from nature and transforming it into something else. You take raw materials and turn it into a finished product. So suddenly a new image evokes. The body is smeared with chandan. Chandan is aromatic, beautiful, fragrant smell. How do you produce it? You take a piece of wood and you have to rub it against a rock and the fragrance comes. It's an unguent. You apply it like perfume. So your body is perfumed. You are wearing silk, pitambar. How do you make silk? Silkworms, farms, spinning, weaving, dyeing, manufacturing. An entire process. And look at that image over there. Around his neck, not in this particular image, but it will be associated with what is called Vaijanti Mala, which is the description is full of lotus flowers and leaves, full of nectar, covered with dew, surrounded by bees and butterflies. That's how the description is. And now compare the two images. On one side is a hermit, on the other side is a householder. This one man can live alone in the jungle, he's just covered with ash, there is a snake on his body, he has got a bull, he is wandering in the forest with animal hide, he has got matted hair. He doesn't need to be part of any society. But if you want to be Vishnu, you will need a crown, which means you'll have to go to the bazaar. You will need sandal paste, which means you'll need laborers to create the sandal paste. You will need silk, garments, you'll need farms, spinning, weaving, industry, market. So on the left side, it's almost like the monks, the viharas, the tapasvis, the rishis, the ones who live in the forest who don't want to be part of society. On the other side is the householder. The Chandragupta Maurya loves, Ashoka loves, he wants that. The person who loves wealth, who goes to the market, who does shopping, who is part of enterprise, who is part of bazaars. One side you have seed, on the other side you have fruits, flowers, leaves. And you look at the difference. Look at the differentiation of the brand. Hermit and householder. So before this, the discourse was, which is better? So all the monks would say, hermit is better. And all the kings would say, householder is better. Which is better? To give up the world or to be part of the world? What is better? Yes, we all go through these crises, right? And that is the time when people usually call Babajis in their life, ki ye duniya mein rakha kya hai? But usually happens after you've made your millions. But before you make your millions, you are like, duniya mein kuch to banna hai. And you go through this cycle where first wealth is very important and then somebody says wealth doesn't matter. And it's an either or conversation. To the extent that we value the monks so much, we think they are better people. Even today, I always am surprised with the number of celibate monks giving advice on sex. Have you noticed? They will tell you how you should have sex, how many times you should have, with whom you should have sex. They have never had an orgasm. This is the power that you have given the hermit. You have decided in your mind that the hermit is superior to the householder. But look at this image. They have merged the two to communicate the idea that one is no different from the other. Shiv hi Vishnu hai, Vishnu hi Shiv hai. Har hi Hari hai, Hari hi Har hai. Now this creates a problem, right? Because if I'm a hermit, I'm on this side. If I'm a householder, I'm that side. You had Arnab yesterday, right? So India wants to know, who is better? How do we assume that the spokesperson of Hinduism are hermits? Who made that decision? How did we just decide? Because every time they say religious leaders, I said, kaun hai ye? How did they become? And most of them are men who claim never to have sex, commenting on how women should dress. And you're like, wait a minute, there's a problem here. Look at this image. It's a very different image. Next to it is a hawk. Garud hai. What do hawks eat? Snakes. There is the snake. The tension is implicit in the image. They're not telling you that, but darshan karo. Bachcha will ask, Mummy, wo kya khayega? And mother said, don't ask so many questions. Because brand messaging pata nahi hai. Yeah, that's what happens. Most of us have experienced this, right? Nobody knows the brand messaging. Because nobody comes and tells us. But it is for 2000 years consistently, these images have gone. Reinvented itself again and again and again and again. Because, now the problem is I am continuously using the word hermit, but anybody who's read Immortals of Meluha, there is nothing Bairag about it, no? It is a love story. And that brings us, look at this image. We'll come to that. Look at this brand image. You go to the temple. Now, different way of communication. This is poster art. Very graphic. This is performance art. You have to perform. You have to enter and experience a temple. This you can only see. It's a visual stimulation. This is an experience. Imagine a performance art. You go to the temple on the left side. This is Shiva Temple. There is no form. There is no hand, legs, face. There is no hand. There is just a rock. It's just a rock. It's aniconic. It doesn't have a form. On the other side, very clearly defined, male form, 4 hands, holding 4 things. It's iconic. It has an icon. See the difference? So Shiv Mandir mein Shiv ki murti nahi hoti hai. Shiv ka ling hota hai. And of course we get excited when we hear the word ling. Oh my God, phallic symbol. It just means someone, the attribute of someone without attributes. Jo aling hai, uska ling hai. Ling means attributes. So brand qualities kya hote hain? So there is someone who has no qualities. How do I represent him? Keep a rock. Don't carve it. So it's an uncarved rock. You don't carve it. So usually it will be a river, a pebble from the river, because the river rolls it and so it's polished and smooth. So it's just a rock. So if you go to Kashi Vishwanath, or it will be just a huge monolith structures, or it will be an icicle. So no human intervention. Now, the interesting thing, to experience करने के लिए, what do you do? यहाँ पे बेल का पत्ता डालो, वहाँ पे तुलसी का पत्ता डालो. Which is more fragrant? Tulsi. Bale has no taste, no smell. It's woody. It's a woody plant. You go in and what do you observe? When you walk in, you will observe a pot dripping water continuously, like a Chinese drip torture. And it is meant to be a Chinese drip torture. It represents the river Ganga. And rivers in India are always seen as feminine. So here is the man who is Vairag. But in his experiences, Nadi beh raha hai sar ke upar, dat. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. When you go to a Shiva temple, I don't know if somebody has observed, many people will clap like this. And they don't know why they are doing it. And you'll ask them, and some people will say, nahi, wo na bhang pi ke baithe na uthane ke liye. Because Bairagi hai, bhang pi ke very doped out like many people today. Unko uthana hai. Unko uthana hai. And then around him, that symbol is the goddess herself. It's the legs of the goddess. She has held him tight. Bhag ke kahan jaoge? That's the message. The feet are pointing in the northern direction. That part, womb, it's just a diagrammatic representation of the goddess who's bound him with her legs. And says, sansar se bhag nahi sakte. Daitya, responsibilities. You cannot run away from responsibilities. Bhang ganja leke kuch nahi kar sakte. Ye bairag nahi chalega. It's very nice. Come back. Sansar ke andar aao. See the messaging. The goddess comes in. These are 2 men, and this is the implicit presence of the goddess. She is present in aniconic form, so there's no form. The interesting thing about Shiva temples is, in the temple you will always see a Ganesh statue and a Kartika. His children are around him. So these 2 women around him, the goddess as water, the goddess around him as the yoni, the children around, and suddenly you're realizing the hermit seems to have a family around him. Vishnu on this side. No goddess next to him. Not on the left, not on the right. They're placed on his heart, but they are external images. The image itself does not have a goddess. The goddess Padmavati temple is outside Tirupati. You go to Jagannath temple, Lakshmi temple is outside. Why? Only in the avatar form the women are next to him. When he's Krishna, when he's Ram. But Vishnu in his Sheshanag, the goddess is not important. Very strange, but isn't he the householder? Shouldn't he have the goddess next to him? Look at the difference. Iconic, aniconic. Why are they doing this? Yahan pe kaun sa doodh chadaya jayega? Kacha doodh. The other side is makhan. How do you make makhan or butter? You have to churn it. You have to ghee. Ghee, makhan, processed, raw. Messaging. So it's a performance art. These temples, the Shiva temples, are always in open air or very bland. Everybody can touch it. It's under a tree, it's in the crematorium. Anybody can go and touch it. Especially in North India, not in the South India, because South India is controlled by the Brahmin community. But North, typically in the North, Shiv mandirs are everywhere. Krishna mandir, very difficult. Have you gone to Tirupati? Have you gone to Nathadwara? Go to Jagannath? They are complex temples where Bhagwan darshan denge. In Nathdwara it's called jhanki dena. He'll come, show himself and disappear. It's style, it's clothes. Bhagwan ke vesh bhusha hote hain. Different clothes. Srinath ji has 8 clothes every day, 365 days a year, never repeated. Go figure. That's creating demand for the fashion industry. So it's rang, there is sangeet, there is music, there's dance, there's like a... But Srinath ji, there is no Radha next to him. There is no Rukmani next to him. Alone he stands in the temple. While Shiva, the Vairagi, has a woman. Very strange. Brand messaging kya hai? Dilution of the brand? Or something else? You see Shiva's stories. Amish Tripathi wrote, important is the love story. Devon ke Dev Mahadev became a hit when you established Shiva as a lover. The story is of him getting married. Shiva Puran is only one story. Bairagi ko grahastha banao. Turn the hermit into the householder. That was the one line brand messaging for Devon ke Dev Mahadev. One line. Turn the hermit into the householder. Shadi karao iski. That is Vishnu in different forms. So many avatars. The story is very different. He's participating. The key theme is of participating in different social constructs. Sometimes he's a king, sometimes he's a cowherd, sometimes he's a... You'll never see the concept of avatar with Shiva. Over there, avatar is the concept with Vishnu. Sometimes cowherd, sometimes charioteer, sometimes warrior, sometimes priest, sometimes an animal. Because life में adjust करना पड़ता है different situation के लिए. सांसारिक जीवन. And then the ecosystem. Shiva is associated with Mount Kailas. Barren land made of stone, covered with snow. No life, no vegetation, nothing. Vishnu, ocean of milk. Boundless ocean of milk. Sounds very nice because from milk you will get all the wonderful things on earth. But there is no shore to the sea. There is no foundation. It is floating. So this is very solid, but has no life. That is completely fluid and full of life. What do you want in life? Stability or mobility? Stability is nice, no, but then you get bored. Mobility is nice, but it's terrifying. It's good when you're on an upward curve. Terrible when you're in a downward curve. But it'll always be up and down, up and down, up and down. So fluid or stable? And the story goes, then why is this man who sits on a mountain getting married? Because the goddess is saying, upar business nahi hota hai, niche business, market mein aao. Kailash Parbat se niche Kashi mein aao. Your work is in the Kashi, that is the place, wahan pe Vishwanath ho aap. There is no use of your divinity unless you participate in life. And over here, the ocean of milk takes many waves. Every wave is called a yuga. The yugas come, yugas go. Avatars come, avatars go. It goes in a cycle and then you go to sleep. And life continues. The messages are being passed through images, through stories, through symbols, through animals. On this side, Shiva is associated with the bull, wild bull who cannot be domesticated. Vishnu is associated with a cow, gentle, domestic, gives up her own milk so that we can get milk. Does not need to be domesticated, is naturally domestic. You don't do, there's no wild cow. It automatically comes, has a homing instinct. Shiva is associated with dogs, who go anywhere and everywhere. In the crematorium, have you seen a dog? It loves you so much that before some time you forget who is the master and who is the pet. Dog is the most wonderful creature on earth. It can make its master pick up its own shit. That's the best thing about a dog. They love you till you become their slave. And that's seduction. That is how the hermit who says, I don't care for anybody in the world, falls in love. And the cow really doesn't need anyone to take care of it. It can take care of itself. If you want to give it grass, great. If you don't give it grass, it will manage on its own. If you want to take its milk, great. If you don't want to take its milk, it won't cry. It is independent and autonomous completely. Then you see the dance. Shiva's dance is completely in isolation. He dances alone. He's not dancing for someone or with someone. It's not a performance. He's dancing, his eyes are shut. He doesn't care for the claps. Well, Vishnu, Krishna is dancing. It's a seductive dance. He's charming people. He's getting them to dance. They're dancing in a coordinated manner. It's a performance. It's a relationship between him in the center and the women outside. There's a pattern emerging. But, look at this picture. Who has a family and who doesn't? Shiva is always shown in a family photograph, right? Husband, wife, 2 children, everybody has an independent vehicle. No? Nobody depends on anybody. Somebody has a bull, somebody has a lion, somebody has a... There is Lakshmi and Vishnu. Do you know who their children are? Have you ever heard a story of Vishnu in a household with children? Have you ever seen a picture of Ram, Sita and the 2 kids? Have you ever seen a picture of Krishna and his kids? How is it that the hermit is shown as a family man and the householder is talking karma karo, phal ki chinta mat karo? He is giving the discourses of a hermit. See the difference? It's just that we just don't notice it. It is subconsciously going in. The conversation is not conscious. The conversation is subconscious. Look at the difference. You now go back. Here is Krishna dancing. But people don't realize. What does he do after the dance? He disappears. He goes away. And all the milkmaids are heartbroken. Pyar karayega, lekin dil todega. Because life is that. He doesn't fulfill. He will create expectations and drop it. Radha ka pyar raha adha. It will never be fulfilled. Sita's love will always be unfulfilled. Parvati has a great time. They scream, shout, fight, go back, come back and make love. See the difference? On one side, the great householder who shatters dreams. On the other side is the hermit who fulfills dreams. And the conversation is so complementary. Is this... The question that you have to ask yourself is very simple. Are we reading these messages? Or were these messages consistent over 2000 years? How was this messaging, the brand personality, call it whatever, consistent in animal world, in plant world, in geography, in diagrams, in iconography, in gestures, in everything? There's a consistency, and it is coming as a reaction to a world which positioned householder as inferior and hermit as superior. The discourse changed. They said, no, there's no difference between the two. Both are the same, provided you take up responsibility. Are you sensitive to the other? Darshan karo. Relationship is not... What do we want to do in a relationship? If we can't control it, we want to run away from it. But this is about tango. The god and the goddess are having a conversation. You cannot create divinity without the feminine. You cannot create divinity without considering the world. In India, the word goddess refers to the world. So while Buddha spoke of nirvana, getting rid of the self, the Puranic discourse was Brahma Nirvana, embracing the other. It's a very different conversation. It is not get rid of bhago mat, relationship tod ke, baithe raho, be a hermit while functioning as a householder. If Shiva can do it, Vishnu can do it in different ways. The householder behaves like a hermit, the hermit behaves like a householder. Each one fulfills responsibility and each one ultimately finds happiness. That is God as a brand. Thank you.
Thank you, Devdutt. That was very, very inspiring, and I think it woke us all up after a long night last night, but truly inspiring. So I have a few questions to ask, and then maybe we'll take a couple from the audience once those chits come in, as the moderators will pick them up. On a slightly lighter note, in the real world, and not in the God world, we see a lot of brands using brand ambassadors. Who would you think would be the most apt to play God? I mean, we know people like Sachin Tendulkar and Rajnikant already play God, but would you think that works in the world of God as a brand?
See, brand ambassador is not the brand, right? You must clarify that, right? The brand ambassador is a paid entity who allegedly represents the brand. So, my understanding, I'm not an ad person, but let's separate the two. So, the assumption is that the audience doesn't know that he's a paid person and that he will sell anything from Coca-Cola to cement to marriage sites to NGOs. So when you have advocates of every god, right? There is a Vaishnav cult, there is a Shiva cult, each one advocating what, so you have advocates. So the idea of advocates, so Shankaracharya for example was tilting towards Shaivism. Ramanuja was tilting towards Vaishnavism. Although both of them were monks.
Right.
Like one refused, Shankaracharya never got married and Ramanuja walked out of marriage. So while they were hermits, but they were tilting towards Shiva and Vishnu. So were they brand ambassadors? I'm not sure, but they're certainly they are advocating or talking about it. So Amish, for example, because he's the most popular writer in mythology, he writes on Shiva. His trilogy. Now he's writing on Ramayana. So he has to come this side. So you go one side to the other, from this side to the other. So he's writing about the god who fell in love to the god who will have a heartbreak.
Great. This is another question. God is a belief system. Yeah, it's mythology, and there are people selling that belief to make money.
Yeah.
As you said, when you showed the poster out there, you spoke about somebody created it, somebody did a creative design, somebody printed the poster, somebody went out and sold it. Do you think that's morally acceptable? And how should brands, the real brands in the real world, behave differently? Or should they?
So let's go one by one. Is making money bad? Let's clarify that. That's Lakshmi over there. Be careful when you're speaking. Because you see, when you use words like morally right, the assumption here is a hermit mindset. And we have been conditioned. Please remember, most religious leaders come from a hermit mindset. कि मेरे पास पैसे नहीं, मैंने पैसे का त्याग किया है, तो तुम्हें पैसे के भोग कैसे दूं? So we have to be careful when we use words like, is it morally right? To make money immoral is the conversation of the hermit. It's not this conversation. Shiva marries a princess. Yeah, so they are very clear about bank accounts. But the point, the second point which you said is about, it's a belief system. Justice is a belief system. It's not reality. Right. So in the real world, there is no such thing as justice. We are imagining it. It's not a natural phenomenon. In the animal world, there's no justice. But you don't, see, when you use the word belief system, there's almost there's something real and there's belief. Justice is belief. Equality is belief. Choice is belief. So my choice is a belief. Others may not agree. That's where your problem is. Right. But you make videos on it, right? Because my choice, my God. So, but we don't, the thing is, we differentiate between the religious world and the real world, usually because we don't understand what is going on. At a conceptual level, you are selling an idea. Justice is an idea. Equality is an idea. Choice is an idea. God is an idea. These are ideas which are being communicated using various tools and technology. We have created the hierarchy that this is real and this is false because like anybody who believes, Mera Bhagwan sach hai, Tumhara Bhagwan jhoot hai, which is across the world. Anywhere in the world you will go, everybody believes their beliefs are real. Other people's beliefs are false. And therefore person who, an activist believes justice is true, it's real. There is no mathematical evidence of it. There is no objective data called, it's an aspiration. It's an emotional and intellectual aspiration. But hai nahi duniya mein.
A bit on the erring towards controversy, could be. In India, the state and the church were never properly delineated. In light of the Hindutva agenda of the government, do you think that brand God is dependent on brand government or vice versa?
Well, India is... First of all, this separation of state and church is something that we adopted from another country, where God is seen in a very structured way. In India, abhi Bhagwan ka matlab, definition of Bhagwan only is so difficult. Hindutva, I know many of them, I don't think they've read a single book.
But have
Everybody assumes their imagination of Hinduism is Hindutva. And usually it is an imagination that enables them to dominate you, suppress you, heckle you. It has nothing to do with the scriptures. So it is more to do with their desire to dominate, their desire to control. Because most religions are very generous and kind, but they come from a very particular, when you read Christianity, when you read Islam, it comes from very different spaces, from the people who are advocating it today. They have turned it into instruments of control. Right? So it's about, we should separate the concept from the advocate. Right? The brand ambassador is dangerous. So in India, this division, state as a concept is also a god, right? Nation state as a god, so we fight for our gods in stadiums and we wave the god's flag. We get angry when the god loses. It's just a secular religion where God is equal to state. So at a conceptual level, religion and secularism are not different. You stand for different things. You believe in this notion called the state, which is, as any strategic planner will say, state is not an objective entity. It's an imagined concept with rules, stories, systems, process. It's a pattern of expectation. Right? So Pakistan is a pattern of expectation, as is India.
That's true. I think all of us in the audience either represent the advertising, media or marketing world. We all strive very hard to build something called loyalty. One of the things that we see God building loyalty through is fear. The fear of God, the fear of failure, and therefore let me go to God, and fear of, the mannats that people ask and things like that. Do you think that's a nice way to, or do you think that's an appropriate way to sell?
Well, there's no appropriate thing. If it gets you the business, it's good, right? You always know it in hindsight. So fear is a very powerful technology to manipulate. And glamour is just another word for fear, right? It's just that we don't realize it. Glamour is just fear, because and why do I want to be glamorous? Because I want everybody else to envy me. I want to be envied. So I want to dominate you and feel when I walk into the party, everybody should stop and look at me. Because it's the same thing as a dominant alpha, saying that when I come, everybody has to cower before me. So glamour comes from the same space as fear. And we don't, it's just that we don't think long enough about it, but it is the fear. A glamorous person is terrified because, yes, I should be more glamorous than I was yesterday, because every day the stakes are going higher and higher, younger people are coming in, so I better have my Botox. So.
This is a question from the group. Where and when did the linga, you spoke about the linga earlier in your presentation, did the linga image of the icon start?
Well, the moment the sexual division started in human beings, Boys started asking girls questions and girls started asking boys questions. So yeah.
There is a clear indication of Prime Minister Modi having a hermit image and the Congress Rahul having a householder image. Do you think they are being managed as God of Shiva and Vishnu?
Observe very carefully. The hermit has a wife who is chasing him. And the householder, do you know any girl around him?
Not yet. So it just might be reversed the other way around. God is clearly the biggest brand in the country. What is the one or a few, is there a doctor in the room? This handwriting is impossible. Learnings that one should take away as a marketer?
I think consistency. 2000 years the messaging has not diluted. They are not continuously.
Okay, last couple of questions. When you hear of news items stating the invention of aeroplanes, phones to be credited to Indians before the West, would you give the credit or justify it as being for brand India, being God for brand India?
Some people believe it makes them look powerful and intelligent.
I think the question is, should India take the credit of being the one to invent brand God?
Well, if you want to, great. If your self-esteem depends on that, then why not? Data doesn't add up to it. But we can imagine anything, right? You know, you have actors who believe that they can save the world. We allow them, right?
Yes. All right, last. If there is no brand steward or custodian, how do you think that the message remain consistent?
I think it is...
by the way, brand steward is marketing...
You see, because the idea is, the assumption here is that they are appealing to something very human. They are addressing a very primal need of the market. So they don't really need someone to shove it down people's throats, because the primal need, everybody is asking the question, should I be in a relationship, should I not be? And look at the answers. They are saying that he who is in the relationship should think like a hermit. And who is outside a relationship should always appreciate a relationship. So they are dealing with very primal human needs of whether to be a part of society or not to be part of society, at least an Indian need. It's a very particularly Indian need. A place where everybody wants to get married and everybody is forced to get married. Shadi karna hai, shadi karna. It's a big thing in India. It's almost as if you are a lesser person if you're not married. And if you are in marriage, everybody knows divorce is extremely difficult in India because of the family pressure.
Yes, sir.
We live in a society where there's this constant struggle, so they're dealing with these very primal issues. It will be colorful imagery and stories, Ramayana, Mahabharata, but the soul, what I said, the Atma jo hai brand ki, it is consistent and powerful. The Sharir jo hai, that will be different and colorful and all that, but if you look at the soul of the brand, it talks to my soul, and therefore I get value out of it, and therefore I communicate it to the next generation.
Right.
Mera anubhav itna अच्छा hai कि I want to tell my child about it. My child tells it to his child and his child and his child. And I think that it has appealed at a very primal level, one. And two, of course, here there is no profit margin, right? There's no quarter by quarter number to be achieved. It is just to be achieved at a very human level. So yes, while I use the word brand over here facetiously, it is not based on a balance sheet. When you, in the world, the real world, there is a balance sheet, which is, so everything is determined by the balance sheet and the mergers and acquisitions which take place around the battlefield. I
think brand God has excelled in the space of word of mouth, which we all try very hard to do.
Viral.
Mr. Devdutt, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.